Hello, good afternoon. I think we are getting everybody after lunch and it's a little bit slower, but that's okay. I'm Jess, this is Gavin. Between us both, we have about 6 decades of global trade, compliance, and logistics experience. And we're here today to talk about disruption. Global e-commerce disruption, value chain disruption across compliance frameworks, business models. In US, it was de minimis. In UK, it's birds. 2 processes, 2 massive disruptions that are affecting billions of dollars and how goods flow across our economies. Now, just to acknowledge the times that we're in, we went ahead and put up our LinkedIn. We're not going to have a formal Q&A session today, but feel free to reach out to us with any questions you might have. All right. So now you know who we are-ish. In the crowd, I promise this is only a hand raise for participation, but want to have a little bit idea of who you are. Raise your hand if you're a brand, e-tailer, retailer, and you have goods. All right. If you are a supply chain, logistics provider, courier, vendor. All right. Government agency. Tech or platform that's enabling commerce. All right. So cross-border matters to all of us to varying degrees, whether you're a brand that wants to grow your products, have new markets, or figure out what's going on in existing markets, whether you want to ship compliantly, whether you want to have ease of use for your merchants to be able to cross borders, it all matters to varying degrees. And cross-border e-commerce is great when it works, just like technology, when it works. If you could think back to a recent time where you've had a call dropped, Wi-Fi didn't work, internet went out, maybe a cyber attack, maybe a system went down at an inconvenient time, all technology is great when it works. Same with cross-border e-commerce. It's great when it goes smoothly and there's not disruption, but we are in a time of disruption. So I'm gonna let my little friend Audrey tee it up for me, and then we'll pick it back up. So like Audrey said, it's a good idea. You want to be able to get to new markets. You want to be able to grow, expand. It's a little bit of a bad idea because it's complex. As soon as you open the door to going across a border, you now have opened the door to complexities and other considerations that you no longer had before, right? And you don't have to be in cross-border very long to figure that out. It is a very quick learning lesson. So in order to get to new possibilities and growth, you have to deal with complexities, and you have to deal with them in a meaningful way. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to start at a bird's eye view, if you will, and then we're going to bring it down, because it's really important to understand the why, not just the what and the how. If you can understand something, you can explain it simply. So let's start with the why. Why does threshold disruption matter? It matters because there's 2 ways at the core of this. If we boil it down, there's 2 main ways that governments get money, acquire revenue. 2 main ways. 1, income, personal taxes, right? The other is customs duties and taxes. So tariff disruption, threshold disruption, these are all ways that governments get money. These are all ways that they want to increase their revenue, especially with more costs, more healthcare costs with other things. Tariffs offset that. So it's really important to be able to have that disruption and to be able to cover for it, because it's going to happen. So let's break it down. We've got 3 main components that are part of tariffs. You've got 3 of them across all customs authorities, whether UK, US, China, etc. There's 3. There's the country of origin, COO. There's valuation, meaning how much your products are valued at. And then there's the HS code. So the first one, country of origin, is where goods are manufactured or experience substantial transformative change of its end state or use. Now there's varying degrees across little exceptions across countries, but by and large, that's the definition. Then you have valuation. And that is not cost of goods sold, because that will get you in trouble. It is typically the cost of goods sold, or the price of goods sold. So the MSRP, the manufacturer suggested retailer price, just depending. There are exceptions where you can do it based on a cost basis, but by and large, it's what the goods are selling for. Otherwise, you can get anti-dumping, countervailing duties, a lot of other things that happen with that. You want to make sure you have valuation right. So those are the first two. And the third one, which is a little bit more complex, is the HS code. Now, everything on this planet, everything has a HS code attached to it. From roller skates to meteorites. Everything. If it falls from the moon, if it comes back in a rocket with a moon rock, it has an HS code attached to it. Now, the World Customs Work sets the first 6 digits for all HS codes around the world. So the WCO sets the first 6, and each country has their own. They can increase it. Some have 8, some have 10. US, UK, they have 10 digits. And it matters to get that HS code right. Now, why does it matter? Because there is a tariff rate associated to each fully qualified, fully digit, whatever that is for your country, 10 in this case, that will determine all tariff rates across any cross-border goods that are sold. So if you have those 3 things, basically, you can assess your duty and tax rate and know how much it's going to cost for your goods to cross a border. Really simple, right? I mean, at this level, it's really simple. But to get to any HS code, and here's the trick of it, because the trick of having especially high volume and low value costs is you have a lot of different goods. If you think about all the consolidators, resellers, there's a lot of goods moving through, and to be able to classify it is really difficult, and here's why. It comes down to the data. The data is pivotal. Because most of us, when we're selling cross-border, we put in marketing descriptions. We are trying to sell to customers. Hey, look at this. This is a buttercream shirt in this color, and it feels lovely, and it feels like velvet. And so here's the problem. You take a description like that, not made of velvet, definitely not buttercream, you're not going to consume it, and you put it into your data to be able to ship with your logistics provider, your broker. Well, I can tell you, love all e-commerce and logistics. Please don't use food names unless you're shipping food, because it's going to get flagged by Food and Drug Administration, each participating government agency. If you say snakeskin print for a shirt and you don't actually mean snakeskin, it could get held by wildlife. And when goods are held, there's usually storage fees and a delay to your customers. So everything pivots around the data. And most data isn't good data, it's crap data. And crap in, crap out. So when you get to your logistics provider, you get to your broker, and you give them your data, you have to know what data you need. And I'll run it through. So if you're going to classify a good, let's say apparel, let's say this jacket, I have to know how it was made. Was it knitted? Was it woven? I have to know, was it for a woman, man, unisex, children? That matters. Sometimes I even have to know how many stitches per inch, depending on what country you're in, on the inseam, the length of it, because the length of it could actually change it into a different category, and that could have a different tariff rate. So you have to know who is it for, what's it made from, is it cotton, is it polyester, is it composite? All of these are really relevant. They're not as relevant to your customer, but they're really relevant when you want to take your goods to cross a border. In fact, it's imperative at this point that you have the right data to be able to cross borders. So the nomenclature and the data matter. They matter now more than ever. U.S. importers and exporters around the world can now tell you that it is imperative now to have the right data. Prior to de minimis leaving, there was only 10 data points you needed, and now you need a full data set. Everything from manufacturer ID to where the cotton is coming from, because it could be under forced labor. There's a lot of considerations now for full data sets. So you're going to see the same thing happen when de minimis changes anywhere else. You're going to go from limited data that you needed to full data. And one thing that we can count on in this life is change, and death and taxes, basically. And the world is changing faster than it ever has before. We have access to more information and data than we've ever had, ever. But sometimes it's incredibly hard to get the right information at the right time. So how do you take information from a website that has your product marketing description and change that into a custom description? It's about being proactive. So when compliance rules collide with consumer demands, what do you have? That's where threshold disruption comes in, and where global companies, platforms, and merchants alike basically all have the same challenges. Even if you're a small merchant and you know your product database very well, you have to think about scaling. If you've already scaled and you have to pivot to a full data set, everyone has to do it. And the reality is e-commerce is growing at double digits. Cross-border e-commerce is exploding. It's not going back. In the US, in 1994, the de minimis was set to $200. In 2016, it changed to $800. And what that means was $800 per person per day was allowed to be brought in, by and large, duty and tax free. And there's exceptions like alcohol, tobacco, what have you. But by and large, for the first time ever, you could even bring PGA goods, participating government agency goods, polarized sunglasses, all different goods, eyeglasses, what have you. You could bring them in duty and tax free. And so for almost a decade, businesses enjoyed bringing in goods, duty and tax free that were already sold. And then things suddenly changed. They're less straightforward, they're more expensive, they're cumbersome. And by and large, most businesses weren't prepared for it. In the US, on August 29th, 2025, de minimis was removed into the US for all countries, not just China. It was actually already in the current administration's, what was called the Big Beautiful Bill. It was supposed to be phased out by the end of 2027. And within weeks, he decided to issue an executive order. And so businesses all of a sudden went from not paying any duties and taxes at all for goods sold to paying a lot. And I mean a lot. And you're not just paying for the duties and taxes, you're actually also paying for the standard customs entry. So we had this entry type 86-321. It served as a catalyst for growth in the US because it was frictionless mostly. It was fast, it was cheap, it was pennies. And then you go to a more formal process and it's quite the opposite. You go from reduced data set to full data set, and it changed the paradigm overnight. In Europe, you have limits are a little bit less generous. You have 135 pounds under birds. Under EU IOSS, you have 150 euros, and that should last for the next couple of years. But things are going to change, maybe in weeks. So if any of you haven't already heard the press speculation, Chancellor Rachel Reeves is looking in part to cover the tax deficit by imposing basically a duty tax imposition or a reimposition of duties and taxes so that birds could be removed. We're not sure exactly when that could happen, but if birds changes or de minimis changes anywhere that you offer services, that you sell, any market you're in, it is going to have an increased liability, change, everything. De minimis means of minimal change, but it's not a minimal change to go from reduced data sets to full data sets. It's not a minimal change to go from paying zero duties and taxes to hundreds of thousands of dollars and having to outlay that cash flow on the front end before you get money in some cases. So there's things that you can do to mitigate your risk. I'll give you one major one. Start with your data. Whether you are a logistics provider, a merchant, a government agency that has to receive the data. At the end of the day, it comes down to data, and you need to make sure you're proactive in what you give to customs and that you understand what it actually means versus what the goods were sold as. This is going to be a pivotal point for everybody. And if you look at the numbers in the UK alone, just last year, low-value goods grew 55% year over year. We all like things cheap and fast, and in this economy, more and more. As prices increase, people want things cheaper and faster, and that's not going to change. So even with these items being lower cost, there's still billions of pounds at risk. And the stakes aren't theoretical, they're very, very real. We just experienced it in the US. And if birds changes, it will be very, very real there. It will be a lot more considerations. And commercial opportunity without compliance clarity is chaos. And so my esteemed colleague here, Gavin, is actually leading in the UK our compliance chaos, basically to provide solutions for anyone trying to reduce challenges in this difficult environment.
Thank you, Jess. So let's look at some numbers. In the UK, in 2024, over £3.8 billion worth of goods came in under the Simplified Bird Scheme. In 2025, that's going to increase to around or more than £6 billion. So if we think about that in relation to the £135 threshold for each parcel, that implies a minimum of 44 million, maybe more than 100 million of parcels were coming in under this simplified scheme. As for tax, well, it's hard to estimate the amount, but let's just assume that 10% of those parcels were being declared incorrectly, typically with a value in undervalue. That's the main concern for the bird scheme. So if we think about that 10%, then the combined duty and VAT on that potentially being underpaid in the UK is going to be in the hundreds of millions, which is a potentially very attractive figure for the Chancellor needing to raise taxes. Coupled with her need to keep UK manufacturers on side, who feel under threat from the amount of imported goods, it's very likely that birds will be a target for her forthcoming autumn budget. Of course, she needs to balance this against inflationary pressures, but there's been a lot of press speculation already that birds will be a target.
Thank you, Gavin. I think you set out the scale of the disruption, but let's take a look at what happened in the US almost overnight. De minimis was removed sooner than expected, and a lot of businesses had no idea what to do. Their customs broker may or may not have been able to provide services because you went from 10 data sets and they specialized in low value e-commerce goods to not being able to provide the standard customs entry process. So then other brokers were flooded with volumes. And if you're going to have high value, it's one thing. Usually you don't have as many. If you're going to have low value and high volume, it's quite another. So to be able to pivot to that, a lot of them couldn't. On top of that, the integrators like UPS, DHL, they had to stop offering goods that had participating government agencies, food, FDA, etc. So anything that hit anything that wasn't very straightforward. So all of a sudden now, the integrators, the couriers were serving as brokers. They couldn't do that anymore. So all of a sudden the businesses had to pivot again. They didn't just have to pivot their business, they had to pivot how they shipped and when they shipped. And some of them had to piece together their own value chain in order to do that, because going with the integrators didn't make sense anymore. On top of that, there was the cash flow impact. A lot of them either stopped shipping to the US and they lost a major market, or they went out of business. We had a couple of beloved brands that basically put out the cash for duty and tax outlay they never had to do before. They thought they would be able to get through it. They brought a lot of goods in before the holiday, but the tax bill was due before the goods sold. So this was September, they bring in things for the holidays, and that's a lot of duty and tax liability that they never had to pay, millions of dollars, and some of them went out of business. So we're seeing the real effects of it. They weren't prepared, they didn't know what they had to do, they didn't have to do customs bonds, they didn't know about the outlay. So even the data sets, they didn't even have the data that they needed to be able to provide it. Even the ones that could cover the duty and tax outlay really couldn't provide the data that they needed, and they had to go back to the basics. Some of them paused shipping, some of them stopped, some of them have picked it up. Some of them were able to pivot quickly, and those were the ones that were proactive on the front end to see where it was going. Just like right now with birds, like Gavin said, you can kind of see where it's going, right? And if you can, then you go ahead and pivot proactively. So going back to cross-border e-commerce, it's great when it works. It's a good idea. It's a little bit of a bad idea. But we're in a time of disruption, and so it's going to be really hard to pivot. E-commerce leaders and leaders at logistics, everyone, they want growth, but they want safe growth. And cash flow being affected, your operational challenges, customs being involved with seizures, destruction of goods, audits, inspections, these all can have a massive impact on your bottom line. There's unintended tax liabilities. There's cart abandonment when they find out how much duties and taxes are. So there's a lot. And let's not forget, regulatory enforcement is only getting higher. Remember, it's one of two main ways governments get money. And they want money for budget shortcuts and tax deficits, and this is where they look. Especially with what happened with the US. They see the billions of dollars that the US government's collected that they're using to provide and cover for other services where they were short with the budget, and it looks really attractive. All right.
Yeah, it's been busy. It's like,
So these aren't isolated issues. So these thresholds are being redirected worldwide. So just want to think about the people affected by these thresholds, remembering it's £135 in the UK. If that does disappear, which is very likely, there's 4 groups of people that are going to be affected and need to start thinking about how to address this. Firstly, the suppliers. Those suppliers are going to have to provide the data, which Jess mentioned, because an import is going to require the extra data to be allowed in. Secondly, we've got the agents who have to actually perform the import declarations. Brexit was a good rehearsal in this country for a huge ramp up in import volumes. Import agents managed, but it was a struggle. And we just don't know how much spare capacity there is. So they are somehow going to have to find a way of declaring an extra, who knows, 5 million, 10 million declarations a year. Thirdly, we've got the importers. They've got the job of finding an agent. They're going to actually do all these declarations for them. So they need to be thinking about taking early action now to identify an agent or agents that can do these full declarations for them. And then fourth and lastly, the customs authorities themselves. We don't know whether HMRC are ramped up to suddenly process these extra declarations. It's likely that there will initially be delays at the border, so again, that's another thing the importer needs to think about. What do I do if my goods are delayed? So this is why businesses don't just need speed and reaction. They need a good strategy. And Jess, that's where leaders make a move, right?
That's right. I mean, there's a lot of internal tension. You have commercial growth teams that want to capture demand, and the compliance team is basically like, ooh, hold your horses, steady as she goes. But the real winners, they're the ones who unify both sides. They're the ones who see it as an opportunity, and they see compliance not as a brake pedal, but as an accelerator. So using a cliche, think about the brakes on a F1 car. You're going 200 miles per hour. You do need brakes. As you turn on the course, they're going to keep you steady. Brakes aren't necessarily a bad thing. So being able to balance compliance and seeing it as an opportunity to pivot for growth, especially in a time of disruption, is a great thing. A lot of big marketplaces are changing. They're also having to deal with it. There's a lot more considerations. If you look at like TikTok Shop entering the UK, they had 131% year-over-year growth increase as of late 2024. They had a 180% increase in revenues, and I think in January they had double the sellers, about 200,000. So you're seeing broad lanes that are going to be affected, and they're all going to have to pivot. If you look at Royal Mail, there's a 150-year-old international treaty that allows foreign postal providers to sell at a cheaper rate than those in the UK. And you can look at all the issues with counterfeit products. eBay alone, they had 6 million prohibited or counterfeit goods they had to remove from their site in 2024. So there's a lot more complexity in it, but at the same time, we are all going to have to deal with it. And all of these major businesses, they all face the same threshold challenges as we all are. So the thresholds are disrupting you, if you think about it. They're also disrupting your competitors, other brands, other logistics providers. It's everyone. It's equal opportunity. So you can see that as friction. You can see it as more than that, right? This is an opportunity for you to get a competitive advantage if you're proactive. If you're looking at it in a way where you understand it's going to disrupt everyone, so what do you do about it? How do you take advantage of it? It's a way not just to survive threshold disruption, but also lead it. And it's going to affect everyone from different standpoints, whether you're a merchant, whether you're a logistics provider, a courier, whether you're technology, everyone is going to have to pivot. We are all going to be affected by it. We saw it in the US. We'll see it any time that there's a pivot change.
So let's give you a quick 7-point playbook of what you should be doing to prepare for this. Firstly, think about your costs. There'll be duty, you'll need to be paying VAT earlier, and you're going to have to pay agents for all these extra customs entries. Secondly, think about the classification. As Jess mentioned, you need to work through your products, make sure you've got all that data available so those import entries can be done easily, swiftly. Thirdly, play to the rules. You know, it's very tempting when you've got a £135 limit on a package to put in a £200 product. It's not worth it. Customs are wise to this. Just one parcel needs to be over the limit, your entire shipment's going to be held, penalties will be imposed. Fourthly, think about automation. You can't automate knowledge, but there are systems out there which can help facilitate the way in which compliance is applied to your imports. Fifthly, scenario planning. Maybe birds will be left untouched. Maybe the Chancellor won't actually take it away entirely. Maybe she'll just reduce the number of goods which come under it. But just work through the scenarios. Are you ready? Sixthly, partnership. You needn't be in this alone. There's expert companies out there, there's sophisticated agents that can help you work through the scenarios and be prepared. And finally, cash flow considerations. Regardless, you're going to be paying some duty, taxes up front. Have you got the cash in store to avoid the delays? It needs steady delivery.
Yeah. And applying the playbook to e-commerce at scale and at economies can reduce costs, delays, and produce successful results for growth. So with global clients, platforms moving billions in goods, small differentiators are key. So here's an example of a case study with Jerf Avenue. With the changes in de minimis, they had to pivot. Smaller brands especially, it's really difficult to have cash flow to outlay when you're just trying to get up and going. Even if you've been around for a while and you're a mid-market brand, that outlay is a considerable cost. So one of the things that they did was we helped them pivot from a US 3PL to moving into a Canadian one. And it was like their own duty and tax deferment in a way, right? They didn't have to pay duties and taxes if it sat in Canada, near shore. You could still have faster delivery, but they didn't have to pay duties and taxes until it crossed the border. So that way, they're not outlaying as much in cash flow, and it's complex to set up, but there are ways to mitigate it. It starts with the data, and then it starts with how you move that data and your goods through your value chain. And you may have to change up your value chain. You may have to change up manufacturing. It just depends. But you have to start proactively looking at how you can pivot and where everything's going. In the end, it saved them cash flow. It also reduced their time coming from Europe to North America for their delivery to their customers by 2 full days, which in this society with instant gratification, I want it now, I want it yesterday, really helps. So if they can do it cheaper and they can get it there faster, that's ideal. They were able to successfully pivot with changes with de minimis, with all of the changes that keep happening, and they're constantly looking for other opportunities like duty drawback. There's money that they already paid. It's a missed opportunity internally that a lot of companies overlook, and it's something that a customs broker can basically get back for you. So there's a lot of little things to look at, and the playbook is good to have for you to be able to constantly reassess in this time of disruption. So at the end of the day, thresholds and the changes with them present basically opportunities for change. You can choose between 2 F's. Friction, you see it as friction, you see it as something you have to weather, change or die. Some people choose to change last minute. Or you can see it as a factor and a multiplier for growth because it's going to give you that competitive advantage. And if you stay on top of it and you decide to be proactive, at the end of the day, you will be one of the market leaders in whatever area you're in, whether it's as a merchant, as a brand, retailer, e-tailer, platform, logistics provider, technology, if you can proactively go to where the growth is going and where the markets are changing. To circumvent an uncertain future, it's really important to be able to have accelerators and problem solvers, and to be able to plug that in different ways and know your value chain inside and out. But you have to get down to the basics to understand how to pivot. This is the threshold moment. So step across it with confidence, proactive, and remember, change is inevitable except from vending machines, or now using the US penny. Thank you.
That was good.
Thank you.